The plan in this video is just to carry on with these Mansions of Madness miniatures that need doing. On to the larger boss monsters now, and I'm intending to do what I can with contrast paints and shade paints, but there's still some basic colours to put down first. I would intend doing some just normal style painting for some aspect of all of them. It's going to be difficult to just use contrast paints on their own. In terms of the colour schemes, I'm just using the little tokens that come with the game, where there's a bit of artwork on each one, and yeah, that's where I'm going to get the basic colour schemes for each of the minis, just using that as a guide. That's how I had approached all the smaller miniatures and the investigators. Just use the really nice artwork from the game. As you can see, it's probably going to be 2 coats of paint to get a nice base, solid base colour down. One thing I noticed with these things, that the eyes, if you paint them black but then get some gloss varnish on them, really gives them a good look. I've mixed up some really thin pink colour here. I'm going to do a pretty rough blend from a light fleshy colour up to more of a pinky purple colour. Seem about right. This is just before I put on some shade paints to do the bulk of the definition. It's not really important the colours I'm using, the brands or anything. You just use whatever you've got access to for the paint jobs like this. Yeah, that'll do for base paints. So now time for some shades. This is a Chthonian camo shade. It's quite a large model to coat, but if you use a sort of bigger brush you can get around it. So I'll try and do it in areas. Just going to go right over the eyes. The shade paint will help blend them in better with the skin. And I think some Carroburg Crimson, which I've thinned down with the Lamian Medium, just so it's not so strong. That way, if you want, you can apply it in one. That way, if you want to, you can apply a second or even a third coat to make it stronger. Nice and easy technique. Okay, and then to get the skin looking a bit more interesting, a bit like the one you see here with the weird sheen on it, I'm using this colour shift metal Borealis Green by Green Stuff World. Needs a good shake. This stuff is going to act pretty much like a glaze over the top, and hopefully you can make that out. It's a very thin stuff, so you have to watch you don't try and put too much on in one go. Recommends to build up layers if you want to make the effect stronger. I can already see what it's doing. Just adds this cool insect-like or weird colour shift effect to it all. It does recommend that you use an airbrush for applying it, but it can be brushed on, and to be honest it works fine from what I can tell. I'm trying to avoid the eyes if I can, because I want to treat them differently later, but I can always touch up stuff with some black again. To me, this stuff would be ideal for your 40k Tyrannids to create quite a nice insect-like shell or skin with what would essentially be just a few layers of paint, kind of base colour, then a shade, and then this on top. And you can get these sorts of colour shift paints in all sorts of different colours to suit your scheme. Yeah, so I'll work around the rest of the body with this. Now I think just about the most important step is adding some gloss varnish on all these eyes, and then that's the miniature complete. It's all been pretty easy to do. I think this last step just makes them come alive. The hardest bit's just making sure that you don't put your finger into the wet varnish and spoil them. Okay, so that's the Shoggoth, or both Shoggoths done, and yeah, just using that bit of artwork there as a rough guide. Kind of green with black eyes, and then the kind of fleshy tentacle things. So next, I'm going to go over this Cthonian shelled creature, very light mauve colour, and then the tentacles again. So pretty straightforward. I think it makes sense just to use some contrast paints for this. One of the many flesh tone ones, or the equivalent. I think that's why I would use the contrast paints first, because I always tend to find that they splatter around onto the other areas, so before painting anything else, get the kind of messy stuff done first, and then trying not to contaminate the bottles themselves. But while I'm doing this, I might just bring in some of the, what's it called, Dreadful Visage or Dreadful Visage contrast paint. It's got that nice light purple mauve colour. Can't mess around with it too much. Yeah, so in an attempt to get this to look like the first one I painted, I'm assuming this light mauve colour, Slanesh grey, as a base, and then some washes and probably just a dry brush to finish it off, and then that's it. So I think I'll use some of this thinned down Drushi Violet, or Druki Violet. Must have used that in the original. Yeah, it looks about right. I'm not fussed if it's not exact, it's just to get an approximate match. Okay, so that's the Chthonians done, nice and easy. Next I'll go for the Star Vampire. Horrible looking thing, as I can see in the art. Yeah, kind of blue, purple, red tentacles in all those mouths. So probably using, again, contrast paints and shades So the Drakenhof Nightshade. I'll probably just go over most of the inner area. Maybe try and keep it off the tentacles themselves. It can be quite tricky to apply shade paints and contrast paints, just given how they dry quite quickly, or they start to dry, and they can leave those moat lines. You know, they're not very forgiving, because you don't want to be going back over the same area too much. It's meant to be a sort of one and done pass. Yeah, I'm just going to wet the brush and try and soften off the edges a bit. Now that's not fully dry yet. I've got some of the Magus purple mixed with some contrast medium, and you can just start adding that on to these tentacles now. And if everything's a little bit wet still, might just help blend it across a bit, just so there's a bit of a transition. Hard to achieve, I think, with contrast paints and things, but it's just that you always feel so rushed with these paints. Something terrible is going to happen if you don't hurry up. And I think for a slower painter like me, I'm not sure I like the time limit, and I don't want to go all the way to the ends. I want to move on to another colour after this, but I'll keep adding this and see how it looks. Just watch you don't dip the brush with all that colour back into the contrast medium pot. So I've got some of the pink contrast one, a much stronger colour, and use that on the ends of all these tentacles, just to get a bit more colour saturation onto them. Again, probably another good one for your Tyranids, if you're looking for an effective method. That alien skin. The trick is just trying to make sure you don't leave any of those little white areas anywhere. I tend to always notice them once the paint's dry. Seems to always be a few. There's quite a few mouths to paint, but it's largely just picking out the teeth. Using this method is getting most of the skin dealt with quite quickly. And it's a fun method. I mean, none of the time-consuming tasks of painting just with the normal methods on miniatures. And I think really appropriate here on this kind of design and usage, these contrast paints. I think they're ideal for this. Yeah, get some really nice transitions happening. Difficult to recreate stuff like that with other methods, maybe unless you're using an airbrush, I suppose, but try not to do that. And then maybe just a stronger amount of this pink contrast on the ends to make it look suitably horrific. But in a matter of minutes, the miniature's pretty much there. And it's kept the brightness that I was looking for. The original one I painted some time ago, many years ago, was much more dark and dull. Painted slightly differently. Certainly didn't have the contrast paints back then. As I say, I don't mind them being slightly different anyway. Helps keep track of them if they've got a slight difference, but it's the same colour scheme overall. So I'm going to leave that to dry. There's quite a few areas there that will need a while to dry off. Now on to the fiddliest part of this one. All these little teeth within the horrible mouths to do. So there's nothing really for it other than to get a nice point on the brush and then start dabbing in an appropriate colour. Probably do this twice. I'll do it again with something closer to white. This time I'm going with a kind of bone colour. Definitely worth doing to help finish off. Seeing as how the rest of it was pretty quick to do. And it's worked quite nicely actually. I like the colour of this one. So that's the star vampires done now. Artwork wise it's pretty close. So yeah, happy with those. And now on to the larger, more unique ones. It doesn't really matter which one I start with. We go for the Formless Spawn. So pretty dark coloured gore sort of looking thing, pretty Resident Evil. And I see there's a number of these big eyes on there, so looking at the artwork there is a hint of these eyes which are similar to the ones in all the eyes in this top corner position, this yellow with black in the middle. Make those out. So I will do the same on here. So I think rather than using the contrast paints directly on the white primer, I think I might just go over the whole miniature with a non-white colour, because I think if I just use the white as it is, the contrast paints will perhaps be a bit too bright. It needs to be a lot darker going by the art. So I think a couple of coats of this for a start. Okay, I've got a few different contrast paints here. I went over it with a light pink, which has created this nice mottled effect, but probably lose most of it after adding the contrast paints. But I kind of want to get the higher up areas with the Volupus pink, this kind of gory colour, and then work down through the purple and then to maybe even black for the darker areas. Looks like it needs it. I'm using the contrast medium as well, just to help it move around. Try and avoid leaving areas that don't have any of the contrast paint on them. I think this is the beauty of painting miniatures from these boxed sets, where, as I've said, the miniatures aren't quite as good as the likes of Games Workshop, so they're less high stakes. You don't really mind if you mess them up too much, because, as I say, they're not as doesn't feel as serious as some of the Games Workshop stuff that I do. So you can just experiment and try out things. Yeah, I think it's going to be a nice combo. It's going to give the effect anyway that I was hoping for. And yeah, the less expensive brushes for the likes of this. And larger brushes as well. Really enjoying painting this thing. I actually thought it was going to be maybe the worst one to do, but it's actually a lot of fun, just the madness of it. The contrast paint blends come out just how I wanted. And then I think now if we just spend the time to, I mean you could leave it at that, but if we just spend the time to pick out the various details, it'll really make a difference. Very much like one of these things from Resident Evil, when the bosses start mutating and changing. There is quite a glossiness to the contrast paints. Once they've dried off, they leave quite a glossy finish. I think that's appropriate for this thing. Got a big, wet, fleshy, horrible thing. So there's a couple of mouths to do there. Over the teeth again. There's a hoof and then the eyes. Okay, so that's it for the Formless Spawn. It's been quite fun doing this one. A lot of contrast with that purple skin and then the yellow eyes nice and bright. I just think if you spend a bit of time, a couple of passes of highlights on various bits and pieces there, and it just moves it on from being a purely contrast painted model and gives it just a bit more. Okay, I think next I'll go for this Dunwich Horror. Very interesting looking. So, looks to be largely fleshy, kind of pale colour, tentacles, light hair, and those orange eyes. So I'll go with this Dark Oath Flesh contrast paint. Because when I think the models are as large as these monsters are, it's better to use a quick method, something that you can get the whole thing coloured up in pretty quick fashion. Guess you just got to start putting the paint on. And I'll just go over everything right now. Just want to get rid of the initial white undercoat. And then can start picking out details after that. So I'm going to start adding some variation into this, so it's not too one-coloured. So thinning some Caribou Crimson down with Lamian Medium. Just going over the ends of all these tentacles or whatever they are. And then cleaning off the brush and just fading off that blend. It's just to start getting another colour into it, so it's not just that one contrast paint. Make it look a bit more intentional and as if you've taken a bit of time to paint things. And I'll probably do this 2 or 3 times to build up a bit of a blend across. Now it's just a case of picking out all these teeth. Sometimes it's tricky with these sorts of moulds to really tell where things are, but I'll just be doing these in a few layers to try and build up to sort of something closer to white. The last thing that you need are these distinctive glowing orange eyes. So I think some thinned bright orange paint. Although the recesses were dark with the contrast paint, I'm going to go over it now and change it to this orange colour. And with a few applications of that, and then maybe a lighter orange for the actual eyeballs themselves, that should give us the effect. Okay, so that's the Dunwich Horror finished. I think that kind of captures the card art thing. Quite happy with how he's come out. It's a horrible thing. All his mouths. But yeah, that's that one done. So I think next I'm going to go with this Lloigor. Not sure how to pronounce that one, but it's quite a dark coloured thing. This armour plating on it. So I think I'm going to go for the contrast paints again, obviously, and this basilicanum grey, maybe a bit of rattling grime. Yes, you can see I've been working from the top down, and I'm trying to introduce just a couple of the other shades or colours into this for a bit of variety. The only real problem with these sorts of paints is making sure you get them everywhere that they need to go while they're still wet, or without going over the same areas too much as it's drying, because that's what can spoil the effect a bit. Overall though, they are easy to use. And they're pretty messy to use. So they splatter everywhere. Okay, I've given those contrast paints some time to dry. So it's again a blend I've got. I've come back over these top sections with the basilicum grey again, just to darken that down. So he's got a suitable alien vibe. Just want to start painting some of the other details now. So he's got a kind of light fleshy toned mouth area that I'll do. In fact, I can just go over the edge onto the teeth. I can do the teeth next anyway. Be quite a nice contrast to the rest. Okay, that's most of the painting on this guy done now. Finished the mouth and other bits and pieces. Just got the eyes to do. I'm going by the card art. I think they're largely yellow, maybe with a red dot. Hard to tell, but I'll go with that. So I'm going to start with a very thin mix, because I want to give it the effect of a glow. So I'm trying to flood the eye sockets there with the yellow. Probably do this 2 or 3 times, let it dry between each coat, and then see how it looks. Okay, now to try a bit of a red dot. Something like that should work. Okay, that completes the Lloigor. I think obviously going by the artwork, this is meant to be a huge creature towering over a building there, but it's got a decent size to it. So that'll do that one. And on to the very last miniature that I'm going to paint for this, the Dark Young. And going by the art, this is a kind of slimy, dark olive coloured thing. The tentacles again. So I think I'll go with this contrast paint, Militarum Green. So I'm just tackling each of these tentacles individually, trying to keep some sort of control on how the contrast paint goes on, rather than attempting it all in one big pass. Gotta try and find a way of holding it also without touching the freshly painted areas. What I thought I would do, just for a bit of variation and interest on them, rather than just doing them all in green, is maybe just try and indicate what might be a bit of fresh growth on the tentacles by fading away the green there. Just using some of the contrast medium to feather that edge away, and then using the other colour and blending it directly on the model, which is pretty easy to do with the still wet paint. Okay, there we go. I think that would be quite useful for a Nurgle type model, that kind of style of blending from colour to colour. Yeah, so I went over all the green with the camo shade paint, just to darken it all down a bit. It's looking a bit too light, too bright I mean. And now I'm just finishing off the mouths, and then that will do it. Okay, that's this dark young done now. Looks roughly like it needs to. Another weird looking creature, but nonetheless that's it. So that's all the monsters done. So I think I'll maybe set up a few shots and see how they all look. So that completes my Mansions of Madness monster figures. They've been a lot of fun to do. Really impressed with the variety. A good chance to use simple painting techniques, contrast paints, shades, bit of dry brushing, all straightforward, and they all end up with their own distinct colour schemes. They each have their own personality there, so highly recommend. And if you do have the box set and some of these expansions, really a good chance to tackle some low stakes painting. Hopefully there's been something useful in the video for you if you're ever going to tackle your own set. Certainly a good place to start for someone maybe getting into painting miniatures. In any case, thanks very much for watching the video.